Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Preeminent Producer Podcast. If you joined us last week, you know that this week is part 2 of a Q&A series where we ask questions that have been submitted and the coaches answer them. So again, we got a lot of good nuggets of gold for you. So here is part 2. Let's dive in.
Are you a commercial insurance producer struggling to stand out from the competition? Do you find it challenging to grow your book of business and create a fulfilling career? If so, then welcome to the Preeminent Producer Podcast. Each week, we'll be tackling important topics, sharing proven strategies and insights from successful producers that are in the trenches and have traveled the journey to becoming a preeminent producer. You'll discover what it really takes to become preeminent and build your book of business in a way that isn't being taught anywhere else. Our hosts are experts in the field and have built thriving businesses by becoming the most trusted advisor to their clients. Welcome to your journey to becoming a preeminent producer. Let's dive in.
If a person responsible for making the decision is unavailable for the initial meeting, it suggests that you meet with the next person in line. Should you proceed with that scheduled meeting?
No, from me.
No.
Absolutely not. And I've played that the wrong way, and I've been rolled because of that. Yeah.
We all do.
Yeah.
Good.
You should reschedule the meeting when the decision maker is available. And if not, move on.
Good. I know we've talked about this one in past trainings and a little bit on the podcast, but in this Q&A, we'll cover it again real quick. Is it advisable to engage in team selling during an initial meeting?
I think so. I love team selling. You know, it's very effective at the closing meeting, and it can be effective at the initial meeting as well. So, I mean, I've done both, but if I had to pick just one, I'd make it the closing meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think if you can pull it off in the first meeting, I think it's worth it because I'm all about relationships. We all seem to be that way. Maybe that's why we're successful, and having another person in on that relationship just makes it that much more difficult to break that relationship. But if you're going to do that, word to the wise, make sure your prospect understands it's not just you coming. Make sure, as Rick has mentioned and we talk about, make sure that that other person knows what they are going to do, what they're going to say, where they fit in the meeting. But if you can pull it off, I say go for it. I definitely agree. In the closing, definitely team selling is a way to increase your hit ratio.
Yes.
I agree with Matt and Christian. Well answered.
Good. Very cool. And actually, on that note, I've heard you guys say this, when it comes to team selling, is the ideal number two people or 3, or what does that look like?
I've only ever done 2, and
Okay.
that's always worked well for me.
Yeah, I've done 2 and I've done 3. And in one appointment, I remember we had 4, including myself. And I think it really depends on the client. I mean, the one we went in with 3 other people and myself was a very, very large, complex account. And we were up against a national broker who I know brought their dog and pony show in before us. So it worked well because each person had a specific assignment to talk about and how their expertise benefited this client. But you don't want to overwhelm. So, I would probably agree with Matt that 2's probably the best, but it really depends on the complexity of the account.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think 2 is the best. We can do a whole podcast on some of the things that we've done here, which is bringing someone to our facility and then having them meet everybody that is involved. So we have somebody from the finance department, from the personal lines department, commercial lines. Every department is represented for a brief amount of time. So there's 8 or 10 people in the room. We dismiss them after a cup of coffee and a donut, and then we end up with 2 or 3 key people that would be involved in that account. The nice thing about that, and again, we can do a whole podcast on that. If they agree to come to your office, you have got a really great.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I mean, that is really, it's the essence of team selling, Rick. And if people can pull that off, man, I
Yeah,
mean,
because
other agents don't do that.
well, a lot of times people think in our situation here, and that it's just you, or maybe it's just you and one other person. But when you can say, no, this is the leader of our accounting department, this is the leader of our personal lines department, our surety bond specialist here, this is our employee benefits folks here. And you can go on because they may be doing business with some of those people at some point. We want them to see, we've got a big conference room here. We want them to see the size of the agency and the number of people that will be backing a flake like me up. I need all the help I can get. So, yeah, I think that can be, and again, we can do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, but I mean, just an invitation to a prospect to come to see you, I think is, so simple. But I'm just thinking now, like, I don't hear anyone doing that, at least in our area.
And when you invite them, it is, and the idea is, hey, listen, it's a brief presentation that we make you. We get you out of your environment, so your phone is not ringing. You don't have any interruptions. You come in here. The meeting has a definite beginning and a definite end. We will have you no more than an hour unless you want to stay, and you're free to leave at any time. We don't lock the door. Part of it is social. You're going to meet some folks who are only going to be in the room for a few minutes. And then part of it is really what we do, how we do it.
Yeah, there was an agency in my area many years ago that for many years had something that they called the room. And they had set up a very nice conference room with, at the time, I never saw the room, but I heard about it. At the time, my understanding is a state-of-the-art, multimedia presentation that they would give. And it was so impressive. And yeah, my understanding is their hit ratio when they got somebody to come attend a meeting there was super high.
Yeah, there's a whole podcast.
Okay.
You don't bring them in unless everybody on the team knows what's going on. There is a very firm agenda and they know when they're in and out, because when you bring non-sales people into a sales environment, it can be risky. We also had one go awry. And it was terrible. And because we had one department that went on and on and on. And at the end of it, it wasn't their fault. It was my fault for not practicing or not knowing what they were going to do. And we lost a really nice account.
I mean, that's perfect. This podcast, there are three guys still in it.
Yeah.
We preach, we try to do as we preach.
Right.
But even then, sometimes it goes awry. We make mistakes, but that's hilarious, right?
We'll devote a podcast to that topic for sure. That's great.
It's great. It's a great thing. Yeah.
Very good. What are some best practices for effective prospecting, lead generation for commercial insurance producers? What do you guys personally do?
Well, I use a host of different sources, Paul, and I think we've talked about it, and we will on even future podcasts. And I think I even and talked about kind of all the sources I use. I try to gather so much information prior to seeing someone without, falling prey to going down a rabbit hole to understand everything about someone. I want to know enough about them that I can go in there and create that quick relationship. But I think you open your eyes, and as a producer, you think, where am I going to find this stuff? Of course, you got all the electronic places. You can Google. We use other programs we pay a lot of money for, and not all agencies do it, like Zywave and some of these other things where we can get prospect lists. We bought prospect lists. I don't really like that. Probably the secret sauce of where I've had most success is writing down, keeping a little book, and I told you guys this, and Matt did it. Keep a little book in my car, and when I see a nice truck, a clean truck, I write down the name. When I go by a nice building in a business park, I'll slow down and write every name in that business park. I'll have someone in the office do a quick check to see if we have any of them. If we don't, then I dive deeper into Googling them, LinkedIn, whatever I can find out about them to figure out what of our services and our differentiation will bring value to that person. And then that's my go. And then I use that to then lead into, how am I going to have my first communication with them? What's that going to say? What's my first voicemail? How's that first call going to go? And I click through that. It's a lot more on the front end, a lot more work to do, but I have found, to the new producers out there, don't waste 30 years trying to figure it out. If you do your homework, and you're going to get success at a lot earlier stage in your career than I had. So anyway, that's what I do.
That's really good. The only thing I would add to that is, because Paul, you asked, what have we done personally? I've really focused heavily over my career on referral generation. I love what we all do. We love inbound, people coming to us. And so I've chosen to really dedicate, I guess, what I would call prospecting, most of that time and energy and effort and resource into developing referral sources. And we've talked about this before, and I'm sure we'll revisit it. But if you can afford to take the time to do it right, because it's not a fast process, but you can get to, none of this is fast, but you can get to the point where you're getting 24 to 48, referrals. They'll sound like specific numbers, and there's a reason for that. I won't get into that now, but you're getting that many referrals a year, 2 to 4 a month. That's a really strong position to be in. There are downsides to referrals. For example, it might be a 4-employee liquor store or something, and there's issues with that too. You can't always control what it's going to be, but that's been most of my prospecting, is more the inbound generation.
I think the quality of your career is the quality of your pipeline. These are the folks that are going to carry you forward, and you need to be very selective about who's in your pipeline. Christian said it, there's so many ways now to research. Matt said the same thing. You can Google, you can LinkedIn, you can do any number of things. Do your homework, research, pre-qualify these people, make sure that they're somebody you'd want to do business with, not just because they pay a bunch of money for their insurance, but the quality of your pipeline is the quality of your year that you're going to have.
Yeah, that's good.
Well said. No, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Let me make a quick observation. Just in the way the three of us handle that last question, it strikes me is something that we all enjoy, which is we all come out at this a little bit differently, right? And I think the three of us have all learned for each other during the time that we've been doing this. There's an expression, I think it's a biblical in origin, that iron sharpens iron, something like that. And it's true, so it's great that we can come at this from different perspectives, different experiences. We all do things, there's a lot of commonality, but we all have our little specialties, and it's really helpful.
Yeah. And I was going to just say at the end of what Rick was saying too, I mean, that's a really great question, Paul, because as a new producer, you can get lists and all of that. But one thing I was going to say is I also try to focus, especially, for my new producers, they should have a passion in that industry. Yeah. But if we can find accounts that have issues that we can solve, man, that's where we go. And what I mean by that is, for example, I can find out, and I know you guys know this, with some of our transportation business, issues that a transportation client may be having through Safer. I can look on that, see all, and if some of our programs can help satisfy and correct those issues they've had with inspections or so forth and so on, that's how we get in. We get in immediately as a problem solver. So yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Matt, is there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. Yeah. And I hope that the people listening to this realize that there is no, here's the golden bullet, here's exactly what you need to do. It really all depends. But anyway,
yeah, Christian, as you develop that, let's say you're interested in a niche or two, you're going to have a few niches. One of the things you might want to do is get to know a good loss control person. You can call that person and say, hey, listen, I'm developing a niche for, let's call it transportation of whatever.
Right.
What are the things that you, insurance company, look for as a loss control specialist? What do you see the big problems are? And that will help you talk a little bit more intelligently to your prospect.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And that should also probably be shared, Paul. I mean, people, I think producers don't look to carriers, loss control reps, even underwrite, all of that as a source of knowledge that they can extrapolate and go and be that differentiation that they need. I think we talked about differentiation, and sometimes producers look, okay, just what is just our agency? Why are we different? And it may be difficult for that principal to even answer that. They may never have thought of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Well, all right, one more for each of you. What is one piece of advice that you would give a new commercial insurance producer just starting in their career? And what can they do to set themselves up for long-term success? I know it's a big question, but in a few minutes, what would each one of you say to a new producer?
The one thing you said, right?
One thing.
One thing. Okay. Positive attitude. You got to have a positive attitude. You got to work and foster that every single day, so that when you get beat up and knocked down, and you will, and we all still, that happens to us, you can pick yourself up and keep forging ahead. I would say positive attitude trumps everything. It trumps other skills, your knowledge, whatever. Positive attitude.
I would say welcome to the best profession in the world, where you can make as much money as you want by the amount of effort you put into it. When you get knocked down, get back up. Always look to be different. Always try to learn more than your competition. Be a sponge. But this industry, with its residual commission income, is the best industry in the world. No day's the same, no client's the same. You're a solver of problems. And welcome.
The industry is greatly maligned. We all joke about how we got into the business, and that nobody sits around in their college campus or whatever saying, gee, when I grow up, Dad, I want to be a property and casualty insurance agent. And your mom starts crying and your dad is embarrassed and all those kind of things. We hear that. But it's you're right. Both of you are right. This is such an amazing industry. It has let me live a life beyond my wildest dreams. But I would say, think about your industry that you're in. Think about what the industry has done. Our loss control, when we loss control things, we save people's lives. We change industries. OSHA, all the things that we do when we interact with somebody. Be proud of this industry, dedicate yourself to it, because it is, as I always say, the oil industry. Without the insurance industry, you're not willing to risk assets. You're not willing to risk capital. It's an industry you can be proud of. Dedicate yourself to working hard within this industry. Hard work and stick-to-itiveness and resiliency, and the ability to get yourself up, dust yourself off, and start again.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 of these Q&A styles. If you like this style, feel free. You can always submit questions on whatever channel, whatever media you are listening to this podcast on, or you can always go to our site at thepreeminentproducer.com and also submit questions as well. If you enjoyed this, I would greatly appreciate take a moment and not only subscribe, like, but leave a comment, leave a review. Let us know what you would like to hear or listen to in future podcasts. Until next time, guys, we will see you in the next episode of the Preeminent Producer Podcast.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Preeminent Producer Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Preeminent Producer Podcast.